I want the waiter with the water. I want the waiter with the water for my daughter. I want the waiter with the water for my daughter, 'cause my daughter has an order for some water on the tray. He's got a menu that'll send you. He's got a menu that'll send you and befriend you. He's got a menu.
All right, that's a little early Ella Fitzgerald with a little bit of restaurant music. We are going to talk very seriously today about what's happening to the restaurant industry during this pandemic. It's a Wednesday afternoon as I speak to you. The sky is gray, but we're going to make you appropriately happy and, of course, appropriately concerned. Everything will be appropriate. That's my main promise to you. So in just a second, we're going to bring aboard two guests. One of them is Chris Prosperi, who's the person who got me thinking about this in the first place. He's the co-owner and chef of McEnroe Bis in Simsbury, Connecticut. And Richard Rosenthal, the founder and president of the Max Restaurant Group. My friend Peter Shapiro and I have been kicked out of at least 4 of those restaurants back in the 90s. Those were the days. But before we even get Rich and Chris talking about this, let's hear from one of the other superstars of the restaurant industry. This would be New York City's Danny Meyer, who's sending a video message to employees of his Union Square hospitality group about oncoming layoffs. He's the restaurateur. He's the CEO. Here's what he had to say.
We have laid off more people today than we probably hired in the first 20, 25 years we were in business. I can't believe those words have just come out of my mouth. And we're doing so because we want to be here with you. We want to be back in business when that day comes, which we can all visualize, when our restaurants and bars and jazz clubs and events and ballparks and museums are back to doing business as normal. This has been a breathtaking blow to our society. We are a social people, and those of us who work in our company are social superstars. How do we reconcile being apart from one another? How do we reconcile not being able to feed others, which is the thing that feeds us so much?
All right, that's Danny Meyer voicing the concerns that a lot of people who run restaurants and work in restaurants have. So let's get into this conversation. So Chris Prosperi, a lot of this between us anyway started one day when I was driving home from Simsbury from a walk, and I started thinking about McEnroe Bis, and I think I sent you a message. And at that point, I think you hadn't had to lay people off, and you were unsure as to what was going to happen, whether or not that scenario, the shutdown scenario, was going to come. But it wasn't very long after that that you did get the message.
Yeah, it was right after that, actually. And first I got to wipe the tears off my face, because every time I hear someone like Danny say those words, it reminds me that I just did the same. And Rich will probably come on and say the same. It's heart-wrenching to have done that, but we did it for the same reasons. We want to be here for everyone when it comes back. And I want to thank you, because that day, when you talked to me that day, I was on the ledge, right? Mm-hmm. You talked me back off the ledge.
Well, I mean, maybe you could just say a little bit more. I just know from our colloquies what it was like for you, how hard it was, but maybe you could just say something about how hard it is. I mean, when you run a restaurant, you build a team, and the people, you can't even do the job if people can't function together, trust one another, have each other's backs. So what was it like to say to that group of people, you're not coming in anymore until this is over?
Yeah, and they're not just my team, they're my family, and after 21 years, a lot of them have been with me the entire time. So, how do you say that to your friends and family? Because that's what, in a restaurant, and not just after 20 years, after a short time, they become your family. We're in the trenches together every day, and it was the hardest thing I think I've ever had to do. And it's taken me the few days to get to where I am today, where I'm finally just coming out of the funk and, realizing, like what Danny said in his little thing there, that, we're doing this for the good of everybody, right? Everyone needs to stay home. We need to keep our restaurants strong, so when we do reopen, we can be there for everyone.
Richard Rosenthal, you faced basically the same problems, and I think it's maybe important for you to say a little something about the people who do work in restaurants, many of whom do not have 5 or 6 weeks salaries that they're sitting on that they can live off of until things straighten out. Maybe you can say a little more about that.
Oh, well, Colin, that's so true. The restaurant people are they're really wonderful people, and they're in this for the passion of serving people, the ability to be social, like Danny said in his he said so eloquently. They tend to be people. They're not making tremendous money. They're making a good living wage. They're doing great, but a lot of them have families, and most of America, as you know, lives a little bit week to week. And though I would say the majority of our service people, the tip-oriented employees, have really grown up in this business, and they do have mortgages, they do have car payments, they have all the things that all of us have. And even though they make a great wage, it's pretty difficult in America today, I think, to really live not paycheck to paycheck. And they've been hitting the knees very hard, and it's as Chris said, it's really heartbreaking. And I didn't have to talk to as many people directly because, having 10 restaurants and managing partners in each restaurant, it was really handled by all of those. But I've had the hard conversations really with my managing partners and chefs and things like that. But it's just so difficult to imagine what they're going through and frankly, what I'm going through. Theirs is worse, but, as the founder and the president of the company, you feel so responsible for all those individuals. And, laying them off was one of the hardest things we've ever done. But we did it, if we're not here 1 month, 2 months, 3 months from now, if we paid everyone during this period, we'd be out of business before we reopen possibly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a hard decision, of course, but it was the only possible decision.
Yeah. So, Chris, one thing that you started talking to me about very early on is just the sheer size of the workforce that we're talking about. It might be 15 million people nationally, 160,000 people in Connecticut. I mean, I think you were the first person to talk to me, I think, about what was going to happen when that kind of a workforce all needed unemployment insurance at the same time. So go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, I think because we're so fragmented, we're not one big company. Rich has 10 restaurants, I have one, but it's still not the whole industry. But you put us all together, and we're 160,000 strong in the state of Connecticut. That's a lot of people out of work right now. And again, not all of them are out of work, but most of them are. And, and how do you, as a government, how do you put that into perspective as far as getting everyone what they need as far as unemployment, insurance, all that stuff? We always seem to people that I talk to that we're a small industry, but we're not. We're one of the largest industries in the country, the restaurant hospitality industry.
Chris, I think we are the second largest employer, other than the federal government.
Yeah. No, I think that is actually correct. So, we've obviously there's a relief bill that's going through Congress right now that has some direct payments to some people anyway, and also has an enlargement of an unemployment insurance, an extension of it, and some money for it, some loans for small businesses. I mean, some of these things may or may not affect restaurants, or may only affect certain restaurants. But I'd like to hear from both of you. Chris, ideally, what would real help look like in terms of being able to keep this industry alive, keep its workers going, and have it be ready to restart when the time comes? What would real help amount to?
Yeah, freeze our bills is one of them, right? Freeze the mortgages, the rents, everything we pay. Freeze them in time. So we're not bringing in any money right now, but we still owe money. We owe rents, we owe electricity, gas bills, insurance bill. If that all freezes and we all freeze everything in time, that when we open, we just start paying them again, and maybe you're back a little bit, but you work that out later. But that's the number one thing. And then number two, people are always asking me what they can do. And I equate it to the CSA model, like when you go and pay for your farm vegetables in the spring before they even plant.
Yeah.
And for a restaurant, all you need to do, like with Richie's, go to the Max Group's website and buy gift cards, right? Go on that site, buy as many gift cards as you can, and then when you know he's reopening, and when he reopens, then go out and use it, and that will help keep us going as well. So those two things are, two huge things.
Rich, how about you? What does real help look like?
Well, real help is that big pause. But I just want to reiterate the gift card part. What Max Restaurant Group has been doing this week is we're selling gift cards, and 100% of that money that comes in between Monday and Friday is going to our Max Employee Relief Fund. So we're kind of giving food out later for money now to help our employees, and we've been doing last week, this week, and the weeks that will follow. We've been doing lunches and meals for our employees. We've been getting them groceries. We've been getting them, milk from our produce vendors that are helping out. Sardilli and Cisco have been very helpful. So we're trying to give them something to help. So what can the government do? They've got to come up with ways, and maybe they are in that stimulus package, but they need to come up with ways that we can't freeze, like Chris said. And we can't be hindered, and we may have to be hindered, but by big loans that, if we get a big SBA loan, now we got this big payment of a loan that's become difficult to carry. Most of us try to stay as leverage as possible in this business. We're working with very small margins, and I know that the guests and the consumers never really believe that, but the restaurant business, and Chris could echo this.
Yeah.
15 years ago, we used to bring in somewhere in the like a 15% bottom line, which was pretty great. And that's if you have a restaurant that's doing really well. If you're not doing really well, it's obviously less. Today, if you're doing really well, you might be bringing in 5-6%. So it's become a much more difficult business. So if you throw some big SBA loans on that, and a business like mine we're too big to get an SBA loan. And even if they triple the number that they're talking about from 8 million to 24 million, we still fall where we can't get one of those loans. And frankly, I'm not sure I even want one of those loans because I don't want to have this huge debt service when we're trying to reopen.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast where Dave Chang, the Momofuku guy, compared it to just piling up college debt. It would be the restaurant equivalent of what generations are going through with trying to work off college debt. Well, there are other issues here. So, Chris, it's not just you, right? Rich was just alluding to some suppliers, but suppliers are having their chains disrupted as well. And so suddenly they're not supplying you. They're not supplying all of these restaurants. Not only
that, they're not supplying schools. They're not supplying food service companies. The produce guys are getting murdered.
Yeah. So, Chris,
we're not the only ones. We're far from the only ones.
Chris, talk a little bit about that ecosystem of just sort of like the stuff that comes into your restaurant.
It's endless. Laundry, Rich just said, produce companies, meat purveyors. It's a whole ecosystem, and you can't. So we're talking 160,000 employees just in the restaurant and hospitality industry. Then if you take all the industries that support us, I don't know what that number is. There are so many little companies that every day come through my back door and bring us stuff. So, we've affected all of that.
And I guess I'm also wondering, Rich. Let's imagine a fairly good scenario where, on May 1st, maybe the shutdown is lifted and people are encouraged to start up again. First of all, having a whole bunch of restaurants start up on the same day would be really complicated, and your walk-ins are going to be basically empty at this point, right? You're going to have to restock. I would imagine that's no small task, Rich Rosenthal.
No, it's a startup, Colin. Half of our restaurants are actually doing takeout currently, so their startup will be a little easier. But Max Downtown, for example, will be closed for if you use May 1st, it'll be closed for over 6 weeks. That becomes almost a brand new restaurant. How many of the employees are going to be back? We hope and pray 100%. But that being a restaurant that has a lot of business traffic, we may be opening in summer. What does that first month look like? So the gearing up and getting ready is going to be, that's going to take a week or two without revenue, and then the expenses start kicking in again. It's all very complicated. We've already started to kind of do business plans for reopening.
Yeah.
What is this going to look like when we reopen? What is are we going to be at the same, or is there going to be a pent-up demand that every person in West Hartford and Simsbury and Glastonbury who haven't eaten out in 8 weeks is dying to eat out, or are they still a little afraid to eat out?
Yeah, I mean, I think at some
we
point,
don't know any of those things.
Right, at some point, but it's not going to be London after the Blitz, where the Blitz is suddenly over and everybody knows there aren't going to be any more bombs falling. It's going to take a while before people know that they're okay and that it is like a reasonable thing to do. On the other hand, I do think people really miss going to restaurants.
I do.
Colin, I got to tell you, I've eaten home the last 5 or 6 nights. I haven't eaten home 6 nights in a row in 35 years.
Yeah.
I'm as a restaurant. I got into business because I love restaurants. I am dying to eat out.
I have food in my fridge for the first time in my life. I never have food in my fridge at home.
So, I mean, if this goes on longer, it is going to be true. I mean, it is going to be true anyway, Chris. There were restaurants that weren't doing great before any of this started. The restaurants that were struggling, those are going to be the first to fall. Just a lot of them won't reopen. If this goes on, another couple of months and we don't really get back into the swing of things until June 1st, I would assume a lot of restaurants that we know and love just won't come back. And I don't know how much you've been able to glean about that just from talking to people but what kind of sense do you have of that? What's the risk?
Yeah, I think that's why this, the government doing something like freezing our payments or just, doing something like that. And like Rich said, the loan's not going to help us because we don't want a loan. We just moved into a new place. We were lucky enough in a year to pay most of that off. We don't want another loan. But if you freeze everything for everyone, right? Does that make sense? If everything stops, since our businesses stopped, then even places that are weaker, right, that don't have a lot of money saved up can get through this, right, because they're not paying bills right now. They're not suffering through this. And the longer it takes to do that, then I guess that's when we're going to see more and more start to fall out, right? And that's why I think, the Connecticut Restaurant Association is really working hard with the governor's office trying to, get some of these things, at least start the conversation for a lot of these things so we don't lose, hundreds of restaurants across the state.
Absolutely. And Rich Rosenthal, one concern that I think some of us have, we should back up and say we're living in a golden age of American restaurant cuisine. So many things have kind of contributed towards that. Even if your margins are getting smaller, those of us who are eating are having a really good time anyway. And then you have this whole social media culture that kind of feeds into it. People are constantly telling everybody else where they're eating and taking pictures of their food. And, you have that sense also of the entrepreneur, the person who can get into the business, and it's also been a great industry for immigrants, for Chinese restaurants to open up. William Tong always talks about his parents doing that. Recent immigrants opening up Chinese, Mexican restaurants, Laotian, whatever. But one of my fears is that if there's a real winnowing of restaurants, we might go back to the days where Olive Garden was, an Italian restaurant and there wasn't that much else because these huge corporations may have deep enough pockets to get through a long period that might wipe out the indie players. I just made a speech rather than asking a question, but Rich, just take it anyway.
Well, that is the fear that, where a group like us falls in, who knows, because each restaurant is a separate corporation, the whole thing. I think the little, the ethnic restaurants, they're kind of scrappy and, they're a lot of family employees and things like that. I think they'll figure it out. They're very hand to mouth, but they're also, immigrants are tough. They know how to make money from little sales and they know how to grind it. And I have so much respect for those family run restaurants. And I think the middle, the newer restaurant or the the restaurant that's, doing 1% margins, who's a little behind, I think they're going to have a very tough time. And we can only pray and beg our government that they come up with the right answers. I don't even know what the answers truly are, other than, what Chris has said, kind of freezing things. But, I have a friend who opened a restaurant a couple months ago who, was open for 3 or 4 months, doing a great job, but he's just getting started. This gap in between, for a month or whatever is going to be very difficult on his business and him personally.
It's all
when you're small, and so they kind of go together almost.
Chris, I know another thing that you and most people in the restaurant business believe is that, you're not just selling food that people are going to put into their mouths while they sit there, that there's something else that you're selling that involves people coming together in a pleasant space, that there's almost a way in which it combines cuisine and aesthetics and community experience. I was at Metro Bis a few months ago, and it turns out the woman sitting behind me had been one of my son's high school teachers at a really critical time in his education, and I hadn't seen her for 16 years or whatever it was. I mean, it's sort of that, right? There's like a whole other bunch of impalpable things that get lost when we don't have restaurants.
Yeah, and Rich alluded to that earlier, that this is, these are the places we hang out. These are the places we do business. These are the places we go with our friends to celebrate. And, yeah, these are the places you just pop in and you're having dinner, and the person sitting next to you is someone you haven't, on the table behind you, is someone you haven't seen in 10 years. I mean, that's the magic of the restaurant. And, yeah, we sell an experience. That's why the takeout thing is a good little plug, but it's not the answer for us like a lot of people thought, like, oh, you'll just switch over to takeout and that'll be the same thing. But that isn't the same things, because we're not just selling food. We're selling that whole experience, including doing the dishes for you, right? I mean, it's a whole package of things.
I'm wondering if either of you have thought, I'll stay with you for a second, Chris. And this might be too early to ask this question, but, as you think about reopening, getting back into business, maybe a month from now, 2 months from now, hopefully not longer than that, restaurants.
How about 2 weeks?
2 weeks. 2 weeks would be a lot better.
Our wonderful president said we're going to open in about 2 or 3 weeks.
That's right. Easter. Yeah. So yeah, that's because.
He's against legalizing marijuana. I don't understand.
Well, he knows the Easter Bunny can't get this disease, so he's very confident. So, but I'm just wondering, restaurants, will they open in a different way? Will the business change? Will the model change? There's ways in which the organization of restaurants is still somewhat predicated on Escoffier and the Franco-Prussian War, and I'm just wondering. I'll start with you, Chris. Do you think maybe there'll be some rethinking of the paradigm while you have this strange little off time?
Yeah, I mean, like Rich, we're doing exactly what he said. We're planning every day when we come in to do a little bit of takeout here and there and feed, we're feeding hospitals and firemen and stuff like that. But most of the time we're spending on this is what we're doing when we're reopening. We're already modeling it and planning it. And it's funny because it's changing every day we come in with new information that we're getting from the government, new information we're getting from our customers. So, I mean, all we can do is, like Rich said, is stay up on it and every day just, alter your plan from what's going on around us. That's the cool thing about the restaurant industry. We're good at that. If we're good at anything, that's one thing we're good at.
All right, Rich, you'll get the last word here.
Well, it's interesting because it's, we're having almost an internal conflict about this, because we're thinking, okay, we got to open up, we don't know what our revenue will be. If you're doing X in a restaurant, we may be doing more, we may be doing less. And we our gut is it will be less for quite a while. So we want to kind of come in a little lean and mean, and that might mean, little trimmer menus, a little trimmer hours, a little trimmer on employees. But then we're thinking, hey, we just laid off 650 employees, and we really want to bring them back. And we want to bring them all back, not, 80% of them. So, as much as we might need to be lean, I think we're going to be so sensitive to our family of employees that we want to bring them all back. We may have to sacrifice the labor costs and say, they need to get back to work regardless.
Yeah.
All right.
So
well,
agreed.
We're going to let you guys get back to your planning.
I have one more thing I want to say, Colin.
Absolutely.
And you saw the picture. This is
You should say that. Yeah.
this is all I got, right? So yesterday, my partner Courtney and I, with our chef Bryson, we were like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So we found our Christmas lights because we were rooting around the basement. So we decided, Courtney came up for what we were going to write on our front porch. And she came up with it, and we put it up in lights, love over fear. And that's what we'll leave you with, right? Love over fear.
Right. We're going to get that picture up, by the way, on the webpage for this. So when you go to wnpr.org/Colin, you'll be able to see that picture. The audio of the show will be up there, too. So thanks to these two guys, Richard Rosenthal and Chris Prosperi. And we are going to take a little break. We'll come back with some information from the trade group. We'll also be talking to a server who is trying to get unemployment.
Nighthawks at the diner, Hammers 49er. There's a rendezvous of strangers around a coffee urn at night. All the gypsy hacks and the insomniacs, now the paper's been read. Now the waitress said, eggs and sausage and a side of toast, coffee and a roll, hash browns over easy, chili in a bowl with burgers and fries. What kind of pie? It's a graveyard charade. It's a late shift masquerade.
All right. We are back. We are talking today about restaurants. But before we go on to our next guest, let me just say thanks to all the people who make this possible. Kat Pastor, for starters, who I think is locating right now, our next guest, Executive Director of the Connecticut Restaurant Association. But Kat is the person in the control room who's kind of keeping these shows on the air. We're with the Wheelhouse this morning and this show this afternoon. And we're facing various new technical challenges we haven't been through before. But Gina Matruda and Joe Koss and TJ Capola have all been really, really great about helping us surmount those technical challenges. Betsy Kaplan, senior producer of the Colin McEnroe Show, is the producer of this particular episode. And who else? Katie Tularski is our big boss. She's watching over everything, and when things go wrong, she tries to get them going right. Tim Rasmussen is an even bigger boss, and he's trying to keep us all cheered up and thinking games that we can play on Zoom. And you do a lot of things at a time like this to keep from going crazy. So, yeah, we're talking about the restaurant business. And let me just check in here and see if Scott is with us. Scott, you're there, right?
I'm here, Colin. How you doing?
Oh, yeah, you sound great. And how do I say your last name? Is it Dolch?
It's Dolch, yes.
Dolch, okay. Yep. Executive Director of the Connecticut Restaurant Association. So, maybe I should ask you a pretty open-ended question here, because I know you were on a conference call right before you came on here, or a Zoom or something like that. I don't know, just in general, give us an update on what has happened to the restaurant industry in Connecticut. Where do things stand right now?
Sure. Wow, really open-ended question. I mean, it's just been it's been a crazy, I guess, almost 10 days here since the executive order came down on March 16th to kind of close on-premise dining, and came fast and furious. And obviously, I know listening a little bit to the end of your other call with the folks and Rich Rosenthal and Chris and those guys, just talking through, what they weren't prepared for. I don't think anyone was prepared for that to happen that fast for these restaurants. And unfortunately, it was definitely a difficult day, and a couple days for these restaurants having to make tough decisions by laying off, thousands and thousands of employees, which we've seen now with the unemployment lines here in Connecticut of up over 70,000, I think, that have applied so far. And, just the worry that they have of their employees, their staff. They are family. They mean so much to them, and having to do that was, such a tough, difficult situation for them. And they're just kind of trying to, I guess, hold it together as best they can through this crisis, still trying to provide for their communities with the takeout, delivery, curbside. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Colin, and just talking about that it's probably less than 10% for most, especially full service restaurants, of their business. So, they're really just kind of doing it to keep a couple people still on staff, the best of their ability, and still trying to provide a service to their community. But realistically, it's they're looking for answers, and I'm trying to do my best as a resource to them and work with the federal government, with our National Restaurant Association, obviously our state, and the governor to try to get them relief and support as fast as we can.
So in your liaisons with the state of Connecticut, you've made some suggestions / requests. Maybe we could talk about a few of those. I mean, obviously there is some kind of relief coming from the federal government that's sitting in the pipeline right now. It'll either get voted on by the House today or tomorrow. I don't have the latest information. It seemed like the House might actually need to read the bill first before they could vote. But meanwhile, at the state level, you're asking for certain things. Maybe, Scott, you could just mention a few of those.
Sure. Obviously, on a state level, we sent a letter to the governor's office and copied legislative leaders on Saturday, which really we just kind of targeted 4 specific areas that we feel the state can help our restaurants now. And leading the top was really looking at grants or no interest loans. Obviously, those SBA loans at 3.75% really, aren't something I think a lot of these restaurants aren't going to be able to use and having to pay back with the revenue that they're obviously not generating, which we talked about. But looking to the state to provide. I know David Lehman had talked about a little bit, in some of his comments about bridge loans and things like that. So, we're hoping to get some more help from the state of what our restaurants are able to go after and get. Obviously, you talked a little about the federal stimulus plan. And I know that's a whole part of this conversation of what other help is out there on a federal side, but from a state side, really looking to the DECD to try to infuse capital injections now. The lack of cash flow for restaurants that they just don't have to pay their bills to be able to stay open is the risk. I mean, we did a small survey already of about 150 restaurants that have told us, almost 45% have closed completely. They're not even able to do the takeout and delivery piece, and that number seems to be growing by the day. And that's kind of our concern, that we need that help and support. The second area we feel the state can do a lot is on the, hopefully we're asking for forgiveness of the sales tax for 3 months. Worst case, obviously, we know in New York they're at least deferring it, but that's a huge number for a lot of these restaurants to have to pay. And we're coming at the end of March to be able to pay their February sales tax payments and not having to pay those or be able to at least possibly defer them. I think forgiving them would be a huge piece to us to keeping these restaurants afloat for this time, because I think Rich and a lot of the guys talked about in the last call. It's not only right now in these next couple of weeks how they can keep everything together, pay some bills, but also once we do get through this, and I'm hoping it's only a month or a couple weeks, but if it's 2 months or 3 months, and then the slow progression of having to reopen, they're going to need that support and those funds to be able to do that. I mean, reopening a restaurant, of closing it for any short period of time, you can ask any restaurant owner. It's just almost as hard as it is right now of trying to keep their business, I guess, going on a small scale or being able to pay those bills. So that was the second element. We talked a little bit about the business interruption insurance, to the state, trying to say, that obviously the COVID-19 doesn't fall into these policies, and what can the state do to help offset that and some support. And then the other big one is the unemployment. Obviously, our employees, we have 8,500 restaurants in our state, 160,000 employees. We talked about the majority of the unemployment people, especially initially, were the hospitality employees, and we're worried about the solvency of that fund to be able to pay unemployment benefits, but also the risk of having to do this as a business that they were asked, unfortunately, by the state to be shut down. What penalties for the businesses down the road for having to do that? Hopefully there are none. Those are kind of the 4 big things we asked of the governor, in this time, and hoping that they can move as a state level. And obviously, I know they're waiting for some federal help as well, but we need help. We need support now. These restaurants are holding on by really the skin of their teeth. Some of them have closed completely and are worried, can they reopen whenever we get through this?
Right. So, and I should say, in our final segment, we're going to talk to a server, an out-of-work server who is trying to get unemployment insurance and unemployment compensation. And I should know the answer to this, Scott, but I don't. Those servers whose wages are wages before tips, is their unemployment compensation handled basically the same way as any wage-earning employee, or is it different somehow?
I believe it is. I don't want to sit here and say exactly it not being as well as I know, but it is obviously not the tipped rate. It is. I believe it's. I think it's beyond minimum wage. I think it's what they're claimed, what they can prove that they've received, in their previous taxes or what they put in. Obviously, we know it's about, even with the 50% of their employment, it could be, $640 per week, I think, is the maximum around that number. At the same time, we also know as an association that is not what is going to help them pay their bills in a lot of senses. These people that were working, almost 40 hours a week, if sometimes more, they're going to need more than that to be able to pay their rent and their mortgage, those things. So we're obviously hoping that first and foremost, the unemployment compensation for all of these employees that have been asking for it in this short hopefully it's a short duration, they're receiving it. But the other thing we're trying to do is we have a foundation that we're getting ready. Hopefully within the next 48 hours, we're going to be launching a fund to try to give out hardship grants to some of the staff here that in that example that you give of people that are in most need right now. And I think we're trying to do our part as much as we can, and we're hoping the state is going to continue to do their part of helping these employees, because they need it more than ever, and we hoping we can support them any way that we can.
Absolutely. I mean, one way to think about this, too, is that the people who are living week to week, the people who, and a lot of these servers and other restaurant employees fall into that category, boy, they can be, if they're not even close to being made whole, they can't pay their bills. They start a cascade, right? They can't pay their rent. They can't pay other bills. They can't make their car payments. All of those things have kind of ripple effects across the economy. So it's a good argument for making sure that they do have cash so they can meet their expenses. All right. Well, Scott Dolch, yeah, sure. One last thing, and then we're going to thank. But what were you going to say?
No, I just think, the biggest messaging I would leave and with this is for people to understand, and even, from the governor down, is making sure they understand that, we obviously want to continue to understand that the crisis that we're in, the public health crisis of this emergency, and making sure everyone is staying safe and doing those things. Obviously, takeout from your local restaurant still goes a long way in supporting your restaurants and your community, and those staff that are out there doing those things. So we continue to ask people to do that, and then we hope the state and federal government are going to continue to look for ways to support these small businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood, the backbone of our state, our restaurants. And, we were obviously not unintentional of any of these owners. They were asked to close. They were the first business probably to be asked to close. And we hope that, we're one of the first businesses to be looked at for that support to help them through these times and help these employees and to get these restaurants back on their feet once we do see the end of this crisis, because, I'm so concerned about that future and what these restaurants look like. And, the stories I have to talk to each day of them and how much they're worried about their own future, their employees being able to hire them back, have that business that's there for them. So I'm hopeful that the state and federal government will continue to help us through this.
All right. Scott Dolch is Executive Director of the Connecticut Restaurant Association. Thanks for being with us. We're going to take a little break. We're going to end the show with one of the servers who is on the unemployment line, metaphorically speaking, and maybe also realistically speaking. All right, we've been talking about a certain group of people without talking to them. We're going to remedy that right now. Kasia Borjo is a full-time server at Capitol Grill. She's currently laid off from that work. Kasia, welcome to our show.
Hi, Colin. Thank you so much for having me.
So there's a deluge, a tidal wave of people seeking unemployment compensation in Connecticut and elsewhere. I think on the Wheelhouse this morning, Danny Haar was saying it's something like averaging 9,000 new applications a day or something like that. It's 100,000 in. So you're trying to navigate that tidal wave right now. How's it going?
Yeah, so, when we found out that we were all unemployed about 8 days ago now, it really started a daunting process of sort of unknowing and how to go through the unemployment process. There was, little to no information right away, and then we were sort of let free onto the online system of unemployment, and with them being so overrun and people applying so quickly, it's been a week of waiting. I am happy to say that I finally got my notification that my application was processed. So that is the first that I have heard from them in 8 days. So now it's sort of a waiting period of what does that mean exactly. I have not gotten any notification of what that amount will be, although it seems that those that are in my restaurant group and those at Capitol Grill that I've been staying close in contact with, that everybody has been receiving notification little by little, and we're all sort of, in the same boat. But it looks like the process is now moving forward, and so that's been, really positive for all of us that have, really been in a state of unknowing for this past week.
So Capitol Grill is run by a parent company, and I know they've tried to do some things for their employees. Give us a sense of what they've tried to do so far.
So actually, so our parent company is Darden Restaurant Group, and I have to say that they've been absolutely amazing in all the way down from the parent company to our restaurant managers and our managing partner who called us all personally and told us about the circumstances and what our next steps should be. We've had a lot of support, and in talking to other people in the industry, that is, not happening for everybody. So, I feel very lucky that myself and my team have really been supported by our management team and our parent company. We have been invited into the restaurant to get perishable items, as those were, not necessary for the large groups that we usually see coming into Capitol Grill once we were closed. We have access to family meals, like Rich was talking about earlier in the show. Our management team has made that available for us as well. We are kept up to date, every other day or so from our managing partner on, anything new that's happening. We were provided with the information for unemployment very quickly. And our parent company is also offering us emergency pay. So, I do feel that we are very lucky, working for a large restaurant group. We've had a lot of support, and, it just continues. We're offered weekly family meals now. Our management team is actually using the gratuity from Takeouts to provide us with family meals. So it really is a big family, and I feel very supported in that aspect.
We should say this is a job that you picked out. Wasn't the only job that you could have done. I believe you trained as a corporate accountant, but this is what you really like doing. Do you still feel okay about that choice? Do you feel like you're doing the right thing with your life?
Well, I thought quite a bit lately about, what it would look like if I was still doing, a corporate accounting job, and maybe, the money would have still been going into my bank account as I sat at home and worked. However, I do what I do because I love the service industry. I love the social aspect. I love the giving people an amazing experience. And so, this is just something that we're going to have to all get through together. And I think that one of the biggest things that stands out to me in all of this is that, the restaurant business, the restaurant industry has always had a huge camaraderie. It is our family, and we're all going through this together. And yes, I'm happy that I'm doing something that makes me happy. This industry, we never really thought that we thought this was sort of an untouchable industry. I think a lot of us do. Everybody goes out to eat, everybody celebrates, everyone has anniversaries and gatherings. And we're not untouchable, it turns out.
No.
So, in this really trying time, to have the support and camaraderie of all of us together is something that I don't think that I would have experienced in that other profession that I chose to leave to come back to the service industry for. So I am grateful.
But it's got to be hard. You're obviously a people person. I talked with Chris at the beginning of this about having a team that all works together and works pretty closely. People have to have each other's backs, so the whole system breaks down pretty quickly. And then you pile on top of that your contact with customers. Capitol Grill's the kind of place that does have some regular customers, faces that you get to know, names you even get to know. It must be hard to give up all of that too. I mean, you've kind of been alluding to it, but if you love people and if you picked a job where you'd be interacting with people all the time, isolation's going to be hard.
I think that's definitely one of the hardest parts. I mean, yes, worrying about getting a paycheck, worrying about being able to pay my bills, and the ominous question of what normalcy will look like when we go back to that and what challenges we'll be facing to restore that is obviously first on my mind. But the isolation factor is difficult. And, I'm really lucky. We have, I keep in contact with my Capitol Grill family on a daily basis. We've been really supportive of each other. We've really shown up for each other, and it makes a huge difference. We've helped each other navigate through the unemployment process. We've been on a group text for, ever since we were laid off, and it really is comforting to know that, those people are still there. I don't have that contact with my guests right now, but the way that I feel about what I do is it's all about building relationships, not just with each other, but with our guests and with the community and with the people that we serve and give amazing experiences to. And I feel that they will be there for us, when we come out of this. So, and that's really, I have to think that way.
Yeah. Kasia, you said something a few seconds ago about, what will it be like when things get back to quote unquote normal? You must wonder about that, whether it's going to be the same, whether restaurants will have to reinvent themselves or whether your job will change at all. Have you had much time to think about that?
Yes, I mean that's definitely on the forefront of my mind. I was listening to Rich and Chris talk earlier about what it's going to look like to bring a workforce back, and speaking to my managing partner David Contino earlier in the week, and him, just being really torn up about what do we do? How do we restart? Do we bring everybody back? Do we bring a limited amount of people back? Will we have the business? I mean, Capitol Grill, our business is really drawn from the convention center and large groups and also, occasions. I mean, we sell experiences they both were talking about earlier. It's not just about, curbside pickup. It's experiences. It's family gatherings. It's things that mean something to people. And what is that going to look like when we come back? Are people going to trust us to give them that experience in a safe way again? Is it going to take some time? Are all of our friends and Capitol Grill family going to be able to come back? So yeah, those things are definitely on my mind.
All right. Well, Kasia Borjo, I just met you, but you strike me as someone who's going to get through this and do well afterwards, and I certainly wish that to be the case. Full-time server at Capitol Grill, currently laid off from work. Thanks for talking to us, and thanks to all of you who listened today. Thanks to our team, too, at Connecticut Public Radio. I'm so lucky to work with that particular group, and here's Joni Mitchell to say goodbye.
He's got a lot of soul. He sings Merry Christmas for you just like Nat King Cole. And he makes up his own tune right on the spot about white walls and windshields and this job he's got. And you wanna get moving and you wanna stay still.